This is new. This is great. So I'm going to be really careful with it because it's... Love you. Thank you. And this is a story about a guy. He says he met a woman at a bar and they got married a few years later. And he'd already been cheating on her, but they got married anyway. And afterwards, after being married, it didn't get any better. And they finally just broke off. And he said, we slept in different beds at night. Finally, she cut me off altogether, fell off the face of the earth, though she's just a few miles away and friends with all my friends. She left me with this goblet that says fuck you on one side and love you on the other. It doesn't hold water because I broke it, saved the pieces, and then super glued it back together. All I see from her now is her birth control receipts in the mail. That was rough. This is a great piece. I just got this a few weeks ago, and this story is really fun because this is about her father's family was demolishing a city block of old buildings in Indiana. He looked under the steps of the building and he found this hat, and then there's a letter in the hat. So it's probably from the 30s or 40s. You can kind of read what it says. Dear, dear heart of mine, I know there's no place in your heart for me, but dear, I can't help it because I love you, dear. There's not enough words to tell you how unhappy I am, and now as I write you this little note, the tears blind me. I don't think I can stand this any longer. I'm afraid of myself of late. Dear, I know I made you feel terrible Saturday night, but dear, I'm so sorry. Will you try to forgive me? And it goes on. And you don't know if the letter's from one person to the person who owned the hat, or is this a letter that the person who owned the hat was meant to give to someone else and never did? And so I love these stories that are, the broken relationships, not with the person who donated it. They just found this and they knew. And it just kind of goes to show that some of these objects really do have this kind of power, like that we can't kind of control. It's like they found it. They don't know these people. Why didn't they just throw it away? Because it meant something to someone. And so then now we have a place for it. People here in Los Angeles and Hollywood in particular are kind of wired to be open to these big, crazy ideas. Oh, you want to open a conceptual art museum on Hollywood Boulevard? That sounds about right. Like there just isn't the same kind of like rigorous geography of what something's supposed to look like as there is, say in New York or even in some places in Europe. Because this is a very sophisticated conceptual art museum, even though the objects are, perfectly mundane. You have about 115 individual objects here on display, and that overview, that journey that I'm asking you or the viewer to go on is the conceptual art, which is a journey through time and geography and empathy for all of these strangers that you'll never meet from all over the world, all different walks of life, all different kinds of relationships, not just romantic. And going through this journey, you end up seeing that all of these times when you felt the most alone was actually when you're the most connected, because it's something that everybody goes through. I'm actually in the midst of doing the selection process right now, in the curation process. That's what my beautiful mind window is all about. I'm trying to figure out where things are going to go and what the objects are going to be. Cologne bottles will have to stay. The cologne bottles, when we got this one, was very, really powerful because you can smell it. Or you can't smell it out here, but I could smell it when I opened the bottles. But they're just grungy, like they would be in a bathroom. And I know some people have said they don't consider death a broken relationship, but I do. This is literally what's left over. Like, this is the most profound example of that, I think. It's just like, yeah, this is what's left over when a relationship's done. I have to keep the pubic hair because people like it grows out. You have to wonder if that's even what that is or not. They were very nice, though, to send it in a jar.
The first time I read this one, I cried. You talked to me of love, gave me small gifts every day. This is just one of them, the key to the heart. You turned my head. You just did not want to sleep with me. I realized how much you loved me only after you died of AIDS. I feel like that could be true in so many relationships, that someone doesn't realize how much someone really loved them until they're thinking about it in retrospect, or until they realize something that they weren't able to see before. And that just like hit me, because it's true. Like you might never really know how someone really loves you or feels about you until you look back. So yeah, that one gets me a lot.
It's hard to talk about broken relationships. I think it's hard for everybody. People don't want to hear you talk about it anymore after they've like given you your allotted time. It's like, okay, move on now. We're done with this. We're all supposed to kind of, get over something, and then you go get under something, new. I don't know. Like, it's like there's these kinds of things of like how you're supposed to be doing it. And so when you're going through something like that and you feel like you're not doing it properly, that can be very isolating. So it's kind of nice to come to a place where you realize that you're not, that isolated. When she said she was going to send them to me, I thought she was kidding. She was not. Now I have them. An ex convinced her to get them, and she did. Like, you can find women in Los Angeles and New York who would like to get breast implants, or you can find women in Los Angeles and New York who already have breast implants. Why would you go about convincing someone who maybe is on the fence about it to do it, but then it's about control? There's not a typical story, there's not a typical reaction. I do have tears, but I also have a lot of people making out. I've got like a lot of laughing. The most common reaction, actually, now that I think about it, is probably the compulsion to want to tell your own story. I have our confessional under the stairs, and it just fills up immediately. I think the one that's down there now has been open for a week. It was brand new, and it's already halfway full. Go through, and it really opens you up, something inside that you can't help but want to share also.
You know what? I tell her, Alexis, all the time, like, if I did not work here, I would want to donate one about a friend, because I feel like people don't do that enough. It's just too painful. And like, I still think about an ex-best friend from like 6 years ago. It was my best friend the first day of college to the last day. And I still wonder if she's okay, like almost every day, even though we haven't talked in like 6 years.
I have like this Chinese painting, water painting thing that my ex got me for Valentine's Day. And when we broke up, I kind of just shoved it underneath my bed for like the last 3 years.
It's these two matching heart lockets. For like a long time, we'd be on again, off again. It's like not the greatest situation in the world, but we weren't always the best of kind of people to each other. And I was gonna send one with a picture of me, and then tell her to send me the other one back with a picture of her. And before I got to send them, we broke up again. We got into this huge fight, and we didn't talk to each other for a while.
I was in a relationship where my mom had died, and he was kind of the worst person to rely on. I mean, I needed him so much, and he was, just literally the worst person to rely on. Like, cheated on me 2 months after my mom had passed, and I was mid-semester, and it was just tough.
So many of these stories remind you that nothing is permanent, and that that's not necessarily a bad thing. Being vulnerable is honestly the bravest and most powerful thing that any human being can do.
These like objects kind of represent, the emotion that's left over. These things are kind of evidence that anything can mean something.
A broken relationship can be anything.
It's God.
It can be with God. It can be with the church even. It's not even like necessarily God. It's just like I can't deal with the Catholic Church. I don't know if I like how I put this out. I like this one because she's held on to this. Came from the 70s, 72. She dated a foreign exchange student from Mexico and fell so in love with him. And he graduated, he left, and she was just this wonderful summer. And he gave her this velour wall hanging, and she's held on to it for 40 years. She's had a whole life. I'm sure she's dated plenty. I'm sure she's fantastic. But it just goes to show that sometimes those young loves aren't just passing phases. In general, in society, the way we treat people about how they should get over something is there's like a set amount of time. Like, oh, you were together for 2 years, so it shouldn't take you more than a year to get over someone. Or you were only together for 6 months, well, you should be over it in 3 months, and then I don't want to hear about it anymore. Just because it's done doesn't mean, the feelings just go away. And that's okay.
That's okay.
You know, the concept of just basically slicing through any sort of differences that we might perceive that we have with each other, of sex or race or age or geography or socioeconomic status or anything like that, it just doesn't matter. We all fall down when we're looking for human connection, and we're all struggling to try to figure out how and why and where and what, and just this, you know, it just really brings you together, just to know that everybody you look at, every, you know, person you pass on the street, they all are having the same struggles as you are. And I think that if I've done my job correctly, that makes you feel a little bit more courageous.